Good morning, aspirants. Today is 23rd of September, and I welcome you all on today's edition of What to Read in the Hindu newspaper. While going through the articles, we will not only see its relevance with regard to prelims and mains, but we'll also try interlink with other GS papers as well. I am here to align your newspaper reading as a part of our syllabus by mapping GS syllabus through the lens of newspaper. So let's get started. The very first article that is there in the paper and that talks about Jaishankar Rubio meets amid trade visa tensions. Now, this particular article, when we map in our syllabus, will fall under GS paper 2, India-US relationships. Apart from that, we need to know the fact and figure with regard to bilateral trade. Then international institutions such as India, wherein India and USA are cooperating in the form of UNGA, Quad, and several others. So in this manner, this particular article is to be analyzed. From paper 3 perspective, economy, wherein trade tariffs, its impact on India and global supply chain could be linked and revised. Globalization, whether this era can it be said as retracting of globalization or not. Then energy, ethanol blending and all. So in this particular manner, this particular article is to be linked with several dimensions from this single piece of news. Then afterwards, the other peripheral areas that can be read and revised in the form of H-1B visa fees hike, what could be the impact on India, Quad diplomacy, UNGA tariff policy, Quad groupings, WTO rules. Also from May's perspective, the areas wherein we can see the strategic convergence in Indo-Pacific region with economic disagreements that we are facing right now. In this manner, this particular article is to be holistically seen, read, and revised. Moving on, the next important article that is there in the paper and that catches our attention talks about primary healthcare providers. So it's on editorials page, and the key theme that has been discussed talked about healthcare system that seems to be at times in fragile state, with not only this dearth of doctor to patient ratio, but at the same time, the qualified doctor that we require. So this particular article will fall under GS paper 2 under the theme issues related to health and policy. This is also very much relevant with regard to fulfillment of our SDG, that is SDG 3. Then what is the role of 𝗏𝗏 committee that is being formed with regard to improving healthcare services in India? From GS paper 1 perspective as well, this could be a theme for society wherein health and education linkages can be established. From the lens of GS paper 3, this particular article is relevant with regard to human resources in healthcare sector, e-governance data, and how e-governance can solve a lot of issue when it comes to healthcare sector altogether. Then the key theme that has been emphasized in this particular article talks about the burnout of primary healthcare providers due to administrative workload. They need not only work upon the patient, but at the same time, there's a lot of administrative workload, which is also there. Then weak systemic support for the doctors. At the same time, from prelims perspective, we need to know National Family Health Survey data, then Ayushman Bharat scheme, then burnout, different sort of burnouts classification has also been discussed. So we need to know about National Quality Assurance Standard certifications. This is being discussed in this particular article. So we can holistically interlink in other dimensions as well. From Main's perspective, this article is to be seen through the lens of critically evaluating India's primary healthcare system, the reforms it is needed for a universal health coverage altogether. So in this manner, this particular article is to be read and revised following different dimensions and interlinking it with other GS papers as well, wherein you can put it as a substance wherein a argument for essay can be quoted, and ethics as well. Several examples from it can be quoted. Moving on, the next important article that is there in the paper and that needs our attention talks about basic structure in secularism with regard to religion. Now, when we map this particular article, this will fall under GS paper 2 polity, wherein basic structure doctrine is to be revised. The case from this has been derived. What is secularism? How is it different than French and USA? Knowing about Article 25 and 26, the key differences between the two. From GS paper 1 perspective, this particular article is to be analyzed through the lens of Indian society, wherein communal harmony is needed and at times how it broke. The Indian society is said to be pluralistic in nature. What are the hindrances that we are facing in this era? The key theme that has been discussed in this particular article primarily talks about Supreme Court's reaffirming secularism as a part of basic structure. From prelims perspective, we need to know about 𝐾𝐈 𝗏𝗏 case judgment, secularism, whether this is explicitly or implicitly mentioned in constitution or not. From mains perspective, the challenges to secularism, judicial role in protecting pluralism, misuse of religion in public discourse nowadays that is being seen in the form of hate speech, hate crimes. So all these angles can be read and revised. Several Supreme Court judgments can also be quoted over here. So in this manner, this particular article is to be holistically seen. Moving on, the next important article that is there in the paper and that catches our attention talks about trans people deserves better. Now, this majorly talks about transgender right. So when we map this in our syllabus, primarily important for GS1 society, wherein gender issues, social empowerment can be quoted. For GS paper 2 as well, wherein welfare schemes for vulnerable section with regard to protection of transgender persons, the recent act in 2019 amendment that has been made, one can read and revise. The several schemes that has been launched to empower them can be quoted. The gap between policy promises and lived realities of transgender people on ground can be read. From prelims perspective, we need to know about 2019 Act of Transgender Protection Act. At the same time, SDG 5, wherein gender equality we have to fulfill. So what are the steps that we have taken in this regard? From mains perspective, this article is to be seen through the lens of social justice, dignity of gender minorities, need for political representation for trans people as well, then inclusive policy making is the need of our to have a participative and inclusive flourishing democracy in India. So in this manner, this particular article is to be seen, read and revised. Moving on, the next important article that is there in the paper and that needs our attention is on a text and context page, and that majorly talks about why is India not importing corn from USA. Whenever it comes to agriculture, and if any sort of trade deal or FTA negotiations are going on, agriculture become emotion for India because the majority of population are directly and indirectly dependent on it. So when we map this particular article from our GS syllabus, will fall under GS paper 3 agriculture, wherein maize production, ethanol blending policy, and GM crops, these three triangles with regard to angle can be read and revised. From GS paper 2 as well, international trade negotiations and WTO rules can be read and revised. The key theme that has been discussed in this particular article talks about US is trying to push for GM crops exports to India versus India's demand for opening up other sectors, but very much hesitant towards opening its agriculture sector with specifically GM crops altogether. So India's sufficiency policy that we are pushing forward for, and ethanol policy, ethanol blending policy that we are focusing on. From prelims perspective, we need to know the targets with regard to ethanol blending, GM crop status in India, that is who gives a go-ahead approval to GM crops, which all GM crops have been approved by that authority and are grown in India as of now. Then maize cropping patterns. So maize could be a crop wherein prelim-based questions with regard to its climate, region, and everything could be asked, as this is one of the favorite questions of UPSC. Afterwards, from maize perspective, we need to know about agriculture, trade politics, food versus fuel debate, farmer protection versus WTO obligations that we have to fulfill. In this manner, this particular article is to be read and revised, and what is the way forward for this. Afterwards, the last important article for the day from my end is about CPCB's report on river pollution. So this is very much relevant with regard to number of polluted river sites are showing a slight reduction as per CPCB's report. Now, at the time of pure water crisis that we are observing in several parts of the country, this observation with regard to river, that is surface water, which is one of the major source of fresh water surface from surface, could be a milestone in this regard. So when we read it from the angle of UPSC syllabus, it will fall under environment, wherein pollution, river resources, and CPCB's role could be identified. Afterwards, this is also relevant with regard to GS paper 1 geography as well, wherein several river systems and its tributaries can be read and revised. Afterwards, the theme that has been discussed in this particular article primarily talks about there is a slight decline in polluted river stretches that in the prior Niti Aayog's report was in very bad state. So even after achieving this particular milestone, there is a concern with regard to it, that is BOD, biological oxygen demand. It is still critical in these river systems. Afterwards, we need to know from prelims perspective the role of CPCB. BOD, is it a correct measure to count pollution indicators? Afterwards, the classification with regard to a polluted river system as well. From mains perspective, we need to know river pollution challenges that is there, federal coordination with regard to river rejuvenation. Afterwards, we can even interlink with 𝗏𝗏 mission, a scheme that was launched for rejuvenation of groundwater depletion. Then there is a direct SDG involved with it, that is SDG clean water. So in this manner, this particular article is to be holistically seen and read and revised. This is all from my end for today's Hindu newspaper. Till we meet for the next time, goodbye and take care. Don't just go through the articles, try mapping it with the syllabus and then start to read it.